So the last unit we have to talk about is going to be the free-to-play from the Halloween event, and she's actually pretty good. Now, I say it's the last unit we have to talk about because barring a random surprise banner where, I don't know, Raiko or somebody comes back for Halloween, this is going to be pretty much it for NA for like the next couple of weeks or so. But this is a very banger free-to-play unit that you're able to pick up. She definitely will be useful to all boxes, whether you are a newer player or an older player. This is a very, very strong free-to-play. And a lot of discussion I know has been kind of booming around this servant, and I'm glad to see it because when she initially came out, I saw her and I was like, this seems like a really solid unit, but nobody was really talking about her at the time. But now that people have been playing with her for the last 2 years and seeing some of the content that she can be really good in, I'm glad that people are starting to respect this Liz for how good she is. Now, before we begin, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like in the video and subscribe to the channel for that daily FGO content. Also, I go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday over on Twitch at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to see me play some FGO and the whatnot, make sure you pop on over there. But enough of that, let's start talking about her kit, starting off with her hits. And for a freebie servant, it's not too bad. You've got some pretty decent arts cards with 2 hits on them, but they are being backed by 0.87% NP gain, and they also have some pretty strong skills backing them up. She's able to give herself a boost to her raw NP gain, and she actually also has a battery as well. So even if you're finding them to underperform, she has other tools in her toolbox to help her out when it comes to NP refund. Now, the only unfortunate thing is she does only have that 4-hit extra attack, which, you know, we do not like to see here in ZTL Industries, because if you don't know, the extra attack is a composite card that gen stars NP and does big boy damage. And seeing that 4 hits, that's a little bit weak, but because of how strong the rest of her kit is, I'm willing to let it slide just this one time. Talking about said skills, let's start getting into them. So starting off with skill 1, you have a very strong combination of NP generation and survivability. She's giving herself 3 hits of invincibility for 3 turns and 30% NP gain for 3 turns on a low 5-turn cooldown. I don't think some of you guys know how insane this is. Pretty much the uptime for this skill is very good, meaning that pretty much more times than not, you're going to have a buff to your NP gain, which is already solid enough considering that she is a Buster unit and is going to be getting fat globs of NP from Koyenskaya, and her Buster cards are also going to gen NP because of Koyenskaya. But one thing that Koyenskaya really doesn't do is protect your party like, say, someone like Merlin or Waver would do, but she has 3 hits of invul that even if they go down pretty quickly, you know it's going to come back very quickly. Because, again, on top of the low cooldown that it already has, Koyenskaya also lowers your cooldown innately as well. So, just very, very strong. Now, you will notice that she has a demerit here. Don't worry about that. The demerits on a lot of these skills are not really that important. They're really, really easy to get rid of because of her own NP. But even then, it's 500 poison, even worst case scenario. Like, that's not doing anything to you. Moving over to her second skill, this is just kind of like her damage skill. A 30% Buster buff for 3 turns is very solid, and then a power mod against wild beast enemies by 50% for 3 turns, but also lowers her own defense by 10% for 3 turns. Now, the defense down maybe could be seen as the first real demerit, but again, you're going to fire this whenever you want to use her NP, and her NP will debuff cleanse these things off of her. Now, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of servants that fall under this wild beast category. But I guess when you do find some of these people, you will absolutely obliterate them. I mean, let's say you're fighting Ivan because you haven't made it through Lost Bill 1 yet. She can be very helpful for that fight. You're going to fight Dobra later on this year for a boss fight, and Koyenskaya, who you can also see, so she can be a bit helpful for those fights as well. However, it does say wild beast enemies, not just servants, and this does include a decent bit of some common enemies that you may be able to go up against. Things like your Chimeras, your Bicorns, your Soul Eaters, stuff along those lines. But you also have these random googly ga enemies that I actually don't know what they're called from Tugunska Sanctuary that have these like machine guns and whatever, and you'll fight some of them for raids and whatnot. And so the fact that she also has power mod against them can be pretty helpful. And I guess also if you haven't beaten, say, Woodwose, she can be very strong against that, especially because he is a caster as well. If you haven't fought Bargus, you can also use her for that fight as well. Just a lot of very good battles you can bring her to. especially if you are, say, a newer player and haven't gotten to some of those bosses yet, but also if you're a older player, you can look forward to using her, and especially something like Tugunska Sanctuary. Now, moving over to her third and final skill, make sure you pop this one last. In fact, in some of the gameplay, you'll see that sometimes if I'm wanting to do my skill cooldowns, I won't actually pop this until I've used the other two skills, gotten the cooldown from Koyenskaya's battery skill, because you do not get the skill cooldown whenever your thing is sealed and whatnot. So if you want to get your cooldowns, make sure you kind of pop this one last. Thankfully, you can kind of pop it whenever you want, and you're probably going to be popping it quite frequently because it is on a 4-turn cooldown, and you do get 30 stars and a 30% battery, which is very, very nice. And even though it does seal your skills, if you fire this whenever you know you want to go into your NP, say that you're firing this when you have 70% or more NP and you want to just get into it immediately, that skill seal is going to be removed by her own NP, and so that could be a very good combo that you could do with some of her skills and then going into the NP, especially if you're going to be doing some mad crits following it up with those 30 stars. Which, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of did wish that as an NA exclusive we could have gotten like the Mighty Chain stuff early, because she's one of those servants that's really fun to use once we get the Mighty Chain update, because then you can really increase those critical attack chances, and it's just very, very nice that she can bomb 30 over here. But yeah, the skills are all very, very strong. She has really good survivability, a very strong battery, 30 star bomb, just a solid card buff for her buster cards, and then a decent enough power mod that I really do like and will be useful in already existent fights and fights that we will get in the future. And then there's her NP, which is just kind of like the little cherry on top, because you might see some people be like, this servant's not quite as good. Look at all these random debuffs. And first of all, 500 poison, not that big of a deal. 10% defense down, yeah, it's a little annoying, but not that big of a deal. The skill seal is the only real annoying one, but let's be honest, if you're going to use the Atlas Academy uniform, which has its own debuff cleanse as well, it's not that big of a deal, especially because her own NP removes all of her debuffs. So you could just kind of fire all these skills for free if you know that you're going to fire the NP that turn and pretty much get all of the benefits and none of the drawbacks. Now, she does have this other interesting little effect over here on the overcharge where fairy tale servants, no, not from the anime, from different stories and legends, I suppose, they get a 20% attack buff, which, I mean, theoretically, you could get up to 40%, but let's be honest, it's just going to be a charisma most of the time. That's kind of nice, because then you have, say, a card buff, an attack buff, and a power mod in some cases. You're really just lacking the NP damage, but what's that? She's a buster servant? Guess we just need to bring Oberon in there, get some extra NP damage, maybe use Black Grail, you can use Heaven's Feel, or coincidentally, we got like 2 or 3 different CEs from this event that are free to play that also give you NP damage, so I think she'll be just fine. She's pretty much propped up to be a very strong single target servant in general. If you can bring her to any fights where you have the Wild Beast power mod, you can bring her effectively type neutral, but even without that, against casters and berserkers, she'll perform really, really well. And even on top of that, if you're really stretched for DPS units or some kind of boss killer without, type advantage, going in neutral, without the power mod, she'll still put out really good damage. And that's just because they set this servant up to succeed. I mean, again, very strong survivability, very solid buffs, giving herself Buster, good power mod, plus attack on the NP, minor debuffs that even if you could call those a negative against the servant, she cleanses all of them for free. And it's the funny thing, it's not just that she's like, oh, I only cleanse mental status, or I only cleanse attack down or defense down buffs. They just gave her straight up debuff cleanse. So even if you run into a challenge quest and the boss is gonna like hit you with a bunch of crit downs or defense downs or just really annoying buffs you don't want to deal with, she can remove all of that every time she NPs. It's like the inverse Shiro Amakusa, right? Instead of removing all the buffs, she's cleansing everything. Now, the only thing that this doesn't get around is her being charmed or stunned or something along those lines, which can be a little bit annoying, that maybe she's like lacking, I don't know, a debuff resistance skill or a debuff immunity, but that's just kind of asking for like extra little pieces that realistically she doesn't need, because she is a buster servant. You'll probably kill the boss in 3 turns anyway. So I think she's very good. If I have to rate her as a free-to-play servant, this is going at the very bare minimum as an A+. I don't think she can go any lower than that, and I'm perfectly fine putting her up in like the S tier like really, really strong free-to-play units, I'm perfectly fine putting her up there because she has performed very, very well for me for the last 2 years over on JP, and I am really excited to see what work she can put in over here on NA. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Maybe you think I'm capping, maybe you think the debuffs are way too much to deal with, and she's a C-tier dookie dog water servant, which I could not fathom putting her anything lower. Again, maybe at the worst A tier. Like, I can't see her going any lower than that. But let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. See you guys in the next video.